Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Gentleman, Season 1, Episode 7. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I underestimated how bad Jack's injuries were. I knew he got laid out, but I mean, he did get taken away in an ambulance, but it just didn't correlate to me like how bad his injuries were. To be fair, Henry did say like, oh, when he gets put down, he's going to be put down. He's not going to be getting back up. But I kind of underestimated how bad things were. And obviously, Susie's taking it pretty hard. Like I said, a lot of heat's going towards Henry. I mean, not Henry. Well, yes, Henry, but also Eddie. And she's not answering his call. So Eddie got her address from Jimmy, who's holding all the secrets, apparently, which we'll get to some of that later on, but, well, he's kind of unaware that he's kind of the one kind of doing his, he's complicated things. Either way, when it's all said and done, Eddie visits Susie, and obviously she's not in a good mood. Like, obviously all she can focus on is her revenge. That's what she wants, and Eddie wants to help make it right, but for her it's like, no, you want it out of this business. This isn't your world. You're the one that did this to my brother. It's like, he's like, yes, I want it out. You weren't going to let me out, so I went to Henry. I didn't expect things to take this turn of events. It's like, yes, but it doesn't matter, because in Susie's head, once again, the dots will always connect back to you started. It's just like, yeah, but he thought he found a roundabout way. And to be fair, you were kind of okay with Henry doing things because you didn't really know who Henry really was either. But yeah, so he wants to try and make things right. But before he even gets a chance to, Susie's kind of going on her revenge tour. She kills the ref. Well, she gets the ref killed. She kills the guy that beat up her brother. She goes after the bookie, but doesn't kill him because it's like, well, he's kind of innocent in this, and I guess maybe he could be useful later on. So she doesn't kill him, but the other two are straight up dead. Dad didn't appreciate the fact that she did that in public, because it's like, if I heard about it, you sure as hell know that Henry did. And the problem is, he now knows I'm coming. She wanted to make an example of, oh, I want you to know I'm coming. I want you to be in fear and afraid because I told you who you were messing with last episode and you thought I was joking. It's like, nah, I'm coming for you. But Bobby's like, now he knows how to scurry around. Like, he's going to avoid us. Like, you are my angel of life. You are not my angel of death. So let me handle this. I have people to handle this, which we never actually found out who. I mean, he probably has feelers out there looking for Henry, but we never saw much on that front because it was mainly Lucy and Eddie doing the legwork this episode, but that's only because we were focusing on them. Who knows what Bobby put out there in the world for people to go like hunting Henry. It's like, yeah, it's on site, you kill him type of situation. So, but obviously it's like, Susie rampaging is not good because it's like, I get it, you're angry, but you're not thinking logically, you're thinking emotionally. You are killing people broad daylight. The actual boxer dude, Uzbek dude, you killed him in a drive-by, broad daylight. Anything could have, so you weren't being too careful. You never know who could catch on. So it's, puts their business and their whole operation even more in danger. But, it's Susie's point of, my dad's not here, I'm going to operate things on my own. I think that has always been the biggest question I've had. I've brought it up multiple times. I think this is one of the instances where wholeheartedly, I believe this is probably, it might end up being the only time Susie's made any moves without her dad, because that was always my back and forth, like I said, but this feels like the one time she might have actually never, because it feels like this is the first time her dad's ever had to really get on her about not following orders, so it seems like for the first time, I mean, it probably might have been other instances, but in the show, this seems like it might be the first time she's ever kind of went rogue to some extent, but her dad told her to stay down, so she, stand down, so she does, And obviously it also comes from a place of, I already have one kid with almost a foot in the ground. I don't want another one joining him. What she had to remind him was like, come on, Dad, Jesus. It's not like he's already dead. He's still alive. But he's pretty bad on, there's like a bleeding on the brain and he's taking some damage. So he's in a coma right now. She even had that perspective later on about a coma is just like being in a deep sleep and you get to relive all your memories and then you wake up refreshed. And I love Blanca being like, yeah, I read about this woman who was in this Chinese woman this woman who woke up from a coma and could speak Chinese. And it's just like, well, thank you, Blankets. I get it. He was trying to like alleviate the situation, but I'm like, I love that it's silent for a second, and then that was his contribution. It was still nice on his part. But I love the conundrum that Eddie himself has to come to face with, because it's like, right, what happened to Jack is kind of on me, so there's guilt about that, but he sees this as an opportunity that he could reach out and use this as a chance to slip from underneath the Glass's, grasp. So he's visiting Stanley, but it's not Stanley he's talking to, it's his right-hand man, which we'll get to all that later, but it's like, right, you hand us over the name, like, oh, you don't want to give over your house? Understandable. We know that's not even on the table, but the other 12 places on the list that are the operational houses for their other operations, because I guess it never crossed my mind like what they're doing with Eddie's family, like having under the farm and stuff like that. That of course they do that with all the other places. I assumed those other places were just places. I thought their dealings with Eddie and his family, like how they have that whole business operation structured there, I thought that was a sole, like, oh, this is our one venture like this. But it's like, no, they copied it in 12 other places too. So it's the exact same setup. The only person who has all the names is Bobby. Because, I mean, it makes sense. Like, when very few people are aware of the other people, like, just like Eddie and his family, the other 12 are not aware of Eddie either, so it makes sense. You want to compartmentalize stuff that even if this falls apart, no one else except for you at the top has access to all that information. I would assume Susie has access to all that information, but we not really, because we haven't seen Susie at any of the other places, so maybe other people in the organization run that, but you would assume Susie would have access to every name and place because she's running things in her father's stead. Like, while he's in prison still running things, she's the one that kind of operates in his stead. She's kind of like the figurehead while her dad's locked up. So we haven't seen it, but she has to have visited other places, or at least knows about it. You assume that he'd fill her in on it, but maybe it's a thing of compartmentalizing of, no, I, Bobby Glass, am the only one who gets to know. Not even my daughter knows all the locations. Like I said, you compartmentalize so no one knows the full structure of the operation. It only comes down to you. But like I said, just the way Susie operates, I'd assume she'd know. But that's, like I said, it hasn't been something they really dived into in the show, so far. So now Eddie has to decide like how he wants to handle that situation. And ultimately, the timing's interesting too, because his sister Charlotte came back. Turns out not only is she back for a little bit from school, she's back from school for a little bit because she's pregnant. Which she's avoiding talking about the baby daddy of it all, which I'm like, you would think her, because I don't know, well, she's in university, but I guess I assume she's on the younger side. I assume like, oh, is she like 18 or something? And it's like, well, she, you could always go back. I assume college in the UK works exactly the same way. Well, in England, it works the same way that it does here in the States, where like obviously at any age you could technically enroll in college as long as you're paying tuition and stuff. But I'd assume she's on the younger side. Like, I don't know if she's like early 20s or not, or what. So I think, it doesn't change anything. I mean, I guess it does. I just was kind of surprised with the whole pregnancy and her family being super okay with it. But maybe it's just because of their lineage and stuff, you like getting pregnant early on, it's like kind of a blessing or something. I don't know. Like, I mean, and maybe it's just like in general, just a supportive family. Like, oh my God, she's pregnant. Freddie's just kind of like, wait, what? It's like, oh, do you want to touch your belly? No, I best not do that. Once again, I don't know if that's just kind of like Freddie's weird about stuff like that, or is it, like I brought up, like they have, I mean, I was about to say different mothers thing, but I'm like, no, even if it's a different mothers thing, it still doesn't change his relationship with Freddie. I mean, Freddie's relationship with Eddie. Like I said, if the truth is what I brought up before, that I think they have, they are Sabrina's kids, but Freddie isn't. Like I said, aside from the dialogue I might have been reading way too much into, that nothing ever explicitly said that, but I'll keep basing this 100% on dialogue from the first episode that kind of hinted that maybe there might be something there, but maybe, like I said, maybe I'm reading way too much into it and I'm completely wrong. But either way, putting all that aside, with his sister back in the picture, still trying to find out a way to get them from underneath all of this. So to get the name of the other lords, because the only person who had that information, who was privy to it, is their dad, and obviously he's long since dead. So I mean, not long since dead, but you still get the point I'm making. So they end up visiting a friend, like a someone, was it Tipsy, who is someone that Freddy knew because his dad made a point for them to hang out. And it turns out, well, Tipsy might have access to that other knowledge, because it turns out, I think he's I think he was one of those families as well, because he talks about it later that he had a dealing with the glasses, but they didn't re-up with him. So I'm guessing like he's not part of the other 12. Like either, so I'm assuming like someone else took his spot in the, which also makes you wonder, is like, do they often switch? Like, I mean, because we don't know how long. Well, they've been doing it for a while, because apparently, what's their dad's name? Archie, and so it might be like Archibald. Their dad's the one who actually set the standard. Like, he's like, if it wasn't for your dad, like our deal would not be as good as it is with the glasses, because it's only that good because of him. Like we're getting a very different percentage beforehand, but now because of your dad kind of like, you know, changing the deal and pushing for it, willing to kind of push negotiations with criminals, whereas the rest of us were so soft-hearted and soft-handed, we were too scared to. So kind of showcases the whole thing about Eddie and his dad being so much alike, which I love, that it's like, oh man, you're so much like your dad. And Freddy's like, right, me? He's like, what? No, God, no. It's just like, Jesus, you don't have to like shit in Freddy's mouth in that moment. Jeez. But my point is, like, when you actually think about the intrinsic eccentricities, I'm butchering that word, sorry, elements of their organization, how often have they switched, like, dukes and stuff like that? Like, if they left Tipsy behind, like, who else have they done that and moved on to a different lord? To be fair, there's not that many they can choose from, so they are probably, like, they probably hold on to dear life to the ones they've already got relationships with. Unless it really calls for it, they probably aren't too quick to let go. Hence why they're not letting go of Eddie. But also Eddie's a very special case of, he's really good at what he does, so that helps out a lot. Puts him probably on the higher echelon of, their interest and not letting go. Like I said, there's a limited quality, and they've got so many setups, so they're probably, like I said, reluctant to let go. Tipsy was one thing, but they're not really willing to let go on any other capacity, so that's why they've latched on, I think, to Eddie even more so, because there's just so few dukes they could use in the same capacity. And once again, Eddie's just a special case, because he's proven himself to be. But either way, they strode up at Tipsy's place, and it's kind of a wreck. He doesn't operate with them, but I still don't get the whole reason why he's got that group inside of his place and he lets them run rampant. I guess, like, to kind of keep some form of operation going, someone else kind of stepped in. Like, it's hard to say. Like, he's just kind of like their whipping boy for whatever reason, and I have no idea why. And he's just like, he just kind of takes it and just accepts it. And it's just because when the Glass family moved away, someone else stepped in, and it's just like, once again, don't fully understand that whole dynamic, but regardless, the end result ends with Eddie getting the journal that has, or diary that has all the names. He had to pay for it with his watch. Because for a second I'm like, is Eddie about to pop off? But granted, you don't know if anyone in that room is strapped. Don't want anything to like pop off. So he has to give over his watch. Freddy has to give over his pants. Which Freddy was like, no, I'm going to do this because I don't want shit to pop off. It's also in conjunction with last episode, because he's like, yes, so I've been having some dark thoughts lately, and I kind of might have maybe, just maybe, talked to Susie about having you killed. I've thought about you dying because that way I could get all the power. He's like, I know it's messed up. I know it's jacked up. Once again, Susie called him out for it being so jacked up. Probably wouldn't be too opposed to that conversation now, but it might also be a thing of, I want your family, I just don't want to deal with your bullshit. She's not in good terms with Eddie at the time, and Freddy's a fuck up, so you know you can't fully rely on him. You kind of want Eddie to stay in his position, because if you don't, you'd be interacting with, if Eddie doesn't stay in his position, you'd be interacting with Freddy, maybe the mom, but like obviously the mom, Sabrina, does not like them either, so that'd be a whole effed up situation. But Eddie snapped on Freddy. It's not as much as he could have, but it's like, dude, I've looked after you your entire life. Like, every fuck up you've ever made, like, I was always there to clean it up. And did I ever ask for anything in return? He's like, look at this place. Look at Tipsy's place. This could be us and our family if we do not get our shit together and get from underneath all of this. This clusterfuck of a situation. So I love that bit at one point in the episode where Sabrina and Jeff are talking, and he's suggesting like maybe we should get her out of here, and it's like, you know, because of the circumstances, and she's like, you're the one that said we shouldn't tell her about you being her father. He was like, no, I'm talking about the dairy farm situation, and she was almost like, oh. I was like, yeah, I figured that's what he was talking about exactly. I figured he wasn't talking about that angle to it, but. This is them like outwardly saying it. Up until now, it's just been speculation, but being heavily implied. Now it's being official. Like, no, that's it. Especially when you saw how choked up he got when he saw that she was pregnant, and it's like, oh, how do you think my mom will take it? And it's just like, you know, because she's just looking like, oh yeah, like Jeff, who's like family, not realizing he actually is family. I mean, I don't know. Maybe she does view Jeff as family, but kind of didn't treat him as much as so. But it's like. I mean, you know, he is someone that's been a part of their family for so long, not realizing, once again, he actually is family. So, I don't know if she in particular looks at him. I don't even know if Freddie or Eddie look at him as family like that, you know? I don't think he's on the same level as every other staff member, meaning, like, what I mean is he's higher on the, like, totem pole when it comes to the, staff members, but still I don't know if they view him as, I mean, I don't know if like Eddie, Freddie, and Charlotte would view him in that, and like I said, a more familial vein, even without knowing that he is more directly family. Susie her place ends up getting found by Henry, which was interesting considering, like, obviously it looks like, well, Eddie coming to visit Susie ends up leading to Henry later on finding her address. And I guess this ties back into, like, maybe not... Was that... Yeah, last episode with the address question mark that was on Jimmy's phone. I guess at the time was asking about... that was Gabrielle asking about Susie's address at the time. But, yeah, I sent her a burger, all the fixings. I was like, did you... Because at first when it was just sitting there, I was like, did he poison it or something? Which I love that the guy he's with, it's like, oh, man, like, mine's, like, overdone. Is yours overdone, too? He's like, mine is shrunken. It's like, oh, go ahead, take mine, too. He's like, oh, I love that, like, response of result. I'm like, is that supposed to be, like, British slang? Just being, like, awesome? I'm sure it's in the context, it seems like it's just meant to be, like, context closed, it just seems like it just meant to mean awesome, but it would be the equivalency of being like, oh, aces, you know? Like, it seems like it would. Just, I'd never heard that, like, oh, results. I was like, that's such an interesting, like, word to use as a response, but, I mean, it fits, and, you know, but you get what I'm saying, it's just interesting. But also now Susie can't go back home because now that bastard, for one, looking for me. My dad told me to lay low, but he knows where I live now, and he's promising to come after me the moment he gets a chance, especially if I go after any more of his people. But it's kind of like, to be fair, you started this first, but in his mind it's like, yeah, but I gave you an option. You chose not to take that option, so your brother's condition's more on you, but now you've decided to kind of go on the offensive. Stop that shit, or I'm coming after you. To be fair, he's going to come after you regardless, the moment he kind of finally gets to go ahead. So Eddie and Susie visit Jimmy. He finally admits, like, okay, how he found out the address is because she apparently gave him a box with some of her shoes came out of, and she's like, I don't remember that. He's like, well, I do, because he keeps the box for condiments and stuff like that, and he says he always remembers addresses. So he ended up talking to Gabrielle about it because she made the excuse, hey, I'm trying to, I want to send flowers to her for her brother. Well, they draw her out and then confront her. So we find out all the connective tissue. The biggest questions I had of, like, okay, who works for who? It turns out, yes, in fact, it's all connected, because it turns out that Gabrielle works for Stanley. It turns out that even Henry is connected to Stanley. I was wondering, it just seemed like the timing of, oh, just as Eddie was like, oh, I don't want anything happening to Jack and or to the Glass family. I want them to come out unscathed. At the same time, that's conversations being had. I mean, who knows? Like, the way it's edited and filmed, it makes it seem like that's all happening at the same time. But that conversation with Stanley could have happened, like, hours before Jack's fight or something like that. Who knows if it's exactly at the same time. But at that moment, you know, Lawrence, not, where am I getting the name Lawrence from? Henry is given the go-ahead, the sign to do what he needs to do to make a point. But yeah, that's what this is all about. That was as I was bringing up before, of like, Susie's been so busy in the thought of, well, we're in different lanes, as long as we don't collide over what our actual product is, it's going to be fine. Everyone stays in their lane. And as I brought up, it's like, well, it's all drugs. Who's to say you can't just snatch it all up? It's not necessarily about the drugs and the product itself. It's about the roots. It's like her whole network. He wants to take all that more rather than the networking connection is what he's trying to swallow up from the business rather than an actual product. That's what Johnston is after. Stanley. That's what he wants to use from all this. So Gabrielle was hired to do a job. And as I thought, I was like, it seemed like, I was like, am I crazy? Because this is back in episode 3. I was like, it looked like they're just throwing out the weed. Once again, they don't care about the product, so they were just straight up tossing it in the water, burn the van just to screw up their distribution, but they found a way around it. Then there's the Florian situation, but they found a way around it. We had an insider, Keith Butcher, once again, found a way around it. And then there was the Collins of it all, which I wonder, was Collins already a part of Stanley's approach? Or, like, was he always a part of, like, the approach, but he never had an end to the Glass family until Eddie came along? Once again, Eddie was the crack in the armor Henry needed, or rather Stanley needed. Or was it after Henry already made dealings with the Glass family officially through Eddie? That's when Stanley approached him, maybe? Approached Henry? I'm assuming that relationship and that dynamic existed way before Eddie got into the picture. I can only assume. But I also have to go back to a point I brought up previously, too, back in episode 6. I figured as much. I was like, yeah, that's definitely got to be Stanley's right-hand dude, not Stanley himself. Like I said, looking at the silhouette and the glasses, I was like, it looks like it's him. So, it turns out he's also the dude that was there when Gabrielle and the other woman were burning the van. Well, he's actually the one that burned the van. Which they threatened Gabrielle to get close to Jimmy and use him, which she does actually feel bad because I think there is truth to, yeah, she actually did start kind of liking him, so it kind of sours that situation. But the person that we've seen, like, Eddie interact with has been Stanley's right-hand man. Florian was working with Stanley's right-hand man. Same thing for Gabrielle. So I'm like, once again, how much of this is Stanley's moves and how much of this just is right-hand dude? I mean, it might just be that thing of, well, I don't want to be directly involved. Because they show the scene of him on the phone with Henry, but that could just be like a red herring to make you think like, well, that's them visualizing it. Because even Susie herself says, well, it makes sense. It's like, yeah, but that, like, Stanley's right-hand dude. Because except for like the interaction they had like last episode, it's all been like his right-hand dude handling all the interactions up until this point. So that's why, how much is like, is it him making a power play of his own trying to take advantage of this? Or is he actually doing all this in service of Stanley? I feel like, I'm not sure. It continues to be 50-50. The season finale will give us clarity on that, I'm sure. So, but now, talking to his sister, who, you know, Charlotte now has been filled in on everything. Now Eddie's stuck between, as he puts it, the frying pan and the fire. Which one's the lesser of the two evils and will result with the less amount of fuss? Because he wants to stay by Susie's side because, hey, you're getting revenge. Especially when you find out, hey, Stanley's been manipulating his game from the start. But Stanley might be your only means of getting out of this game. But it's also, you found out everything has been about him, like, poaching their process. You know, it's like, right, I brought it up before, he was making a deal with the devil with the whole Stanley of it, but it's like, you don't know which one's the lesser of the two evil in the grand scheme of things. I mean, even if you pick what you think is the lesser of the two evils, doesn't mean that won't turn into some future mega evil shit later on. So you side with Stanley now, there's no guarantee you won't cause more of a fuss in the future for everyone, but even including yourself, like, and we don't really know how Eddie views himself. I don't even know if Eddie views himself as like, oh, I'm an honorable man. I'm a guy who does the right thing all the time. Charlotte says, like, well, I don't know what your choice is going to be, but I know whatever the case may be, you're always going to do the right thing. He tries to do the right thing, but I don't even know if Eddie will look at himself like a good guy. He probably looks at it as like, hey, at the end of the day, I'm just surviving. That's what this is all about. I'm just trying to find my way through. Made it clear I will do any and everything, get my hands dirty, be the bad guy if it means protecting my family. So he made a choice and decided to continue doing dealings with Stanley. I don't think he gave them the real list. I think it was a bullshit list, because afterwards he went to go visit Bobby himself. And it's like, oh, so you came here to tell me you fucked me twice. It's like, not really. Because I thought what was going to happen is when we cut back to Henry and them were going to go visit the other places. I thought that was what was going to happen, but they went to the hospital. They just needed to go ahead to kind of probably go ahead, take out Jack and probably take out Susie. He was just waiting for the opportunity. But like, no, they were waiting for you, were expecting you, and took down his right hand guy. And then it comes down to Henry, and it's like, oh, I meant Henry's right hand guy when I'm referring to that, not as Stanley's right hand guy, but the dude that's with Henry got taken down, and they want to prolong his suffering. Because we see at the same time Jack is waking up, and it's like, well, him getting up immediately and beating Henry's ass into like a coma or whatever, not possible after, in this condition. But I was kind of hoping he would. I'd hope he got up and he'd be the one to deal with Henry. He's awake. There's that silver lining. We don't know what, the damage, we don't know the full extent of the damage done until afterwards. Like, does he have memory loss? Will he, there's a lot that could be permanent damage that he has to suffer with for the rest of his life type of situation. But in that moment, Henry runs his mouth off to Susie, saying like, right, your posh boy was working with us the entire time. You didn't see that coming. So what does she do? She decides to screw over Eddie. It's like, oh, you screwed me over? Like, I thought we were good up to some extent again, but now I found out, like, oh, you're still working with Stanley behind my back. To be fair, that was kind of before he found out, but it still doesn't change the fact that he was working with Stanley up to a certain extent behind your back before he found out he was involved with Henry. But once again, we don't see that side of things, but I'm pretty sure he's screwing over Stanley after finding out the truth. Like, he's, rather than going with route A, choosing the glasses, or route B, choosing Stanley, I think he chose route C, a different option. We don't know what him and Bobby's conversation involved, but yeah, now Susie has told the gospel, the truth, and it's like, not only is Freddie on the chopping block again, and so is Eddie, probably their entire family's about to get blotted out by the gospel and his crew. So, which is such a bummer, because like, Susie did that, because she was super angry. We also don't know what she did with Henry. I'm sure he's still alive and being kind of tortured, because it didn't show her like put a cap in him and like put it into him right then and there. So once again, wants it to be prolonged. So her doing that is like, it's sadly like Eddie has. I mean, maybe in the end, Eddie did choose the glasses side of things and decided to go against Stanley and ended up trapping him or whatever. Once again, we don't know what him and Bobby discussed, but Susie wasn't a part of that conversation, and now she ran with this bit of information she got, and now is about to, like, screw over Eddie and his entire family. So it's going to be interesting to see where all this takes us going forward into the season finale, how this is all going to play out, how this comes to an end, who's going to live, who's going to die. I don't think anyone in Eddie's family is going to die, but I don't know. What about Stanley? What about anyone on the glass side of things? Bobby? I mean, Jack is up, but will Susie? I don't see that being a case. I mean, will Eddie double down and join with the glasses? Is he going to just double down going forward with the entire family? Like, how's that going to play out in the aftermath of all this? We'll ultimately have to wait and see. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.